Let's freaking go! Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Bill O'Brien, this late in the process, has decided to leave Alabama for the same position with the New England Patriots. And from a non-Alabama perspective, trust me, I know it's an SEC channel, and I shouldn't say this to appease the Alabama fans. I'm just going to tell you how every other team in the SEC feels about you. Everybody rejoices when you guys lose. The truth is, this is actually a good thing for Alabama, and I'm going to tell you why today. I know it doesn't seem like that because this is so late in the process, but comment down below, do you believe that Alabama is better off without Bill O'Brien? And then a little bit later, I'm going to give you a few names to keep an eye out for going into next year, okay? So the first thing is I totally understand why Bill O'Brien decided to do this. I don't think Nick Saban is going to be mad at his good buddy Bill Belichick for getting his old friend back in town. And obviously, for those that don't know, Bill O'Brien used to be the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick. And as we saw last year with the Patriots, it is pretty evident that Bill Belichick likes hiring former coaches, as he did with Matt Patricia to run the offense, which was an idiotic decision in and of itself. I'm going to be honest with you, though. I get why Belichick did what he did, but we're here to focus on Alabama. And the truth is, if you actually did watch a lot of Alabama football, and maybe the Crimson Tide fans that watch every single snap of every single game can correct me on this, the truth here is I think Bill O'Brien, you can make a strong case, was the worst offensive coordinator under Saban, especially during this modern era. I would put a lot of guys ahead of him, including Brian Dable, and of course Steve Sarkisian is probably number one, and Lane Kiffin. I think Bill O'Brien was propped up by, obviously, a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in Bryce Young. Also, it's not entirely Bill O'Brien's fault that Alabama's had a little bit of an issue this year with wide receiver play. Their wide receivers weren't as dominant as they have been in years past. This was probably their least talented and least reliable group of receivers. Jermaine Burton, to me, was a little underwhelming. And obviously, Harold never really played. And, of course, Ajayi Hall and all of that. Alabama's receivers were fine, but for Alabama standards and all the first-round picks, they weren't exceptional. I just think this entire offense with an inconsistent offensive line was propped up by two people. That, of course, is Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs. And we saw that in particular in the LSU loss for Alabama, where it was mostly either Bryce Young spinning around and making a lot of special things happen, or Jahmyr Gibbs catching an angle route or quote-unquote, a Texas route for a big game. Bam! I'm looking at you. Yes, you right now. So, obviously, I hope you subscribe, ring the bell. We are trying to get to 2,000 subscribers, and not only does Nick Saban have to replace the offensive coordinator, he's got to replace his defensive coordinator. Once again, talent always trumps everything else. So, scheme, how much does it matter if you have 4 and 5 stars everywhere? Well, it matters just a little bit. And a little bit later, I'm going to give you one defensive coach I think would be a disastrous hire for Saban's defense. But for right now, let's go through a few coordinator names, okay? Starting off on the offensive side of the football, and before we continue, as you guys have been seeing on this list, these are all the offensive and defensive coordinators that have served under Nick Saban at Alabama. This was compiled by Bill Bender at Sporting News. So we're going to get to some of these names potentially as some OC and DC replacements because, like Bill Belichick, Nick Saban does love familiarity, and obviously his list of contacts is pretty high when it comes to the coaching profession, okay? So starting off here with the offensive side of the football, Nick Saban, of course, this late in the process, could hire from within. Derek Dooley, obviously the former head coach at Louisiana Tech and Tennessee, is a potential guy he could go to. What about Holman Wiggins? Is a current staffer on Alabama's staff. He has been, I believe, their passing game coordinator or wide receivers coach, and maybe he gets his first ever opportunity at Alabama to actually call the shots. So Those are two names from within, but honestly, this is Nick Saban. There is a long list of coaches that would love to have this potential opportunity. And I have a few from the college ranks and a few from the NFL ranks to list off here. Dan Mullen is one name I think would immediately take this job to coach with Nick Saban. Obviously, Mullen has coached against Saban quite a bit, and this would be the one that I would fear the most if I were a fan of another team in the SEC, and I am. I hope Dan Mullen doesn't go there because I do think his scheme is really elite. His play calling is very elite as well. And the good thing about being an offensive coordinator is, yes, you still have to recruit, but it is not of the utmost importance. Dan Mullen is a schematic genius, so that would be somebody that I think Alabama would take a look at. Jeff Lebby and Major Applewhite are currently OCs at different universities. I don't think Jeff Lebby is leaving Oklahoma for Alabama. I could be totally wrong on that. Obviously, the former OC under Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, he is in his first year at Oklahoma. I think Lebby is going to return to Norman. And, of course, Major Applewhite is I believe he was the first ever OC at Alabama. Would he come back? I think he would. Obviously, a former player at Texas, a Baton Rouge native as well. It would make some sense. And then, of course, you go to the NFL ranks, and there are quite a few names that would be interested. I think Joe Brady is one that I've seen a lot. I think the Joe Brady stuff has cooled off a little bit more from a collegiate perspective. Obviously, I'm always going to love Joe Brady for what he did, but in his last few stops, where has he necessarily been, electric, if you will? At Carolina, his offenses, I know he didn't have the best to work with, but they weren't necessarily great, and he has been Josh Allen's quarterback coach, the Bills quarterback coach over the past couple of years. From an LSU perspective, it would make me very conflicted if Joe Brady were to go be the Alabama offensive coordinator. It's already kind of weird that Zach Mettenberger is on the Alabama staff, but still, I don't think Joe Brady is going to be the guy. But I think these four NFL names would make a lot of sense. Cliff Kingsbury, of course, the recently fired Arizona Cardinals coach, would be somebody that would be interested. But, when a coach says, hey, I'm taking a one-way ticket to Thailand to get away from the sport for a while, maybe he really is burned out. That was a very tumultuous end to his Arizona Cardinals regime. He got obviously a pretty hefty amount of money from there, so how hungry is he to come back to the college ranks? Obviously, the Alabama job is different than all the other jobs that are out there in that you are coaching with, obviously, the greatest coach of all time and a bunch of 4- and 5-star talent, but I don't know if Cliff Kingsbury would be a fit. Adam Gase would be very interesting. Obviously, kind of like Bill O'Brien, his NFL career was, and Bill O'Brien was a better NFL coach than Adam Gase, but, at the end of their tenures, they weren't necessarily viewed as great coaches. Adam Gase makes a lot of sense because he has ties to Nick Saban. He used to coach for him, I believe, in Michigan State. So Adam Gase could be somebody that would join the Saban rehabilitation coaching program. A name to keep an eye out for is Doug Nussmeier. He's a former offensive coordinator under Nick Saban. He is currently the quarterbacks coach for the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, his son is currently the backup and could potentially be the starter next year for LSU, Garrett Nussmeier. So Doug Nussmeier knows the SEC. He's someone that Saban is familiar with, and he is obviously a former OC under Nick Saban many moons ago. So that's a sleeper name to keep an eye out for, but I think Doug is very content being the Cowboys coach. And the one name that would make a lot of sense, especially if Alabama is going to start Jalen Milroe next year, is Greg Roman, the innovative offensive coordinator who was Lamar Jackson's coach over the past couple of seasons. Schematically, that would make a lot of sense because not only can Jalen Milroe run, Ty Simpson also has some dual threat capabilities as well. So, and to go one step further, a quarterback with really high upside, still, very raw. Eli Holstein is also a dual threat quarterback as well. So, yeah, Greg Roman would be very, very interesting as the offensive coordinator. And he, of course, is very innovative and creative. So those are just some names. Obviously, Nick Saban, he can hire anybody under the sun. I honestly think for coaching for Saban and getting to work with the talent that Alabama has, I honestly don't even think he reaches out to guys. I think they reach out to him, which is very interesting, and I think that's going to be the case for the defensive side of the football as well. I'm going to give you a few names as the defensive coordinator. Obviously, Pete Golding going to Ole Miss was such an interesting move for me. What does that say about Alabama? I don't know if it says anything at all, but here are a few defensive coordinator names. I think that would make sense. I would love to see Charlie Strong back in the SEC. I still think he is one of the best SEC DCs ever, honestly, with Urban Meyer when he was at Florida. And, of course, his career has not really been the same because he became the head coach at Texas, and nothing has ever really been the same for Charlie since then after a very successful tenure as the Louisville head coach. So, I think Charlie would be somebody I would be very interested in coming back to the SEC. Also, a former SEC DC with a lot of respect, who is currently the DC at Penn State, is Manny Diaz. Would he leave for this job? I am not so sure. I think either one of those names, though, would be excellent pickups for Alabama. Boom! I'm looking at you. Yes, you. Right now. So I'm going to give you a few other names, but I want to say thank you for making Power Hour SEC so much fun. Our video on Jaden Rashada did pretty well. Obviously, it's still such a big story, so if you want to check that out, it'll be floating in your face at the end of this video, okay? So I'm going to give you two in-house names, one that would be very interesting and one that would avoid. The first, though, is the guy I think who is actually going to get the job, and that is Jeremy Pruitt. I think that's where Nick Saban is going to go, and makes a lot of sense. Obviously, Jeremy Pruitt was very successful. Obviously the head coaching stuff just did never work out for Jeremy. I think Saban's going to want to bring him back. He really enjoyed having Pruitt as his DC. So I expect Jeremy Pruitt to be your next Alabama defensive coordinator. There's no sourcing, no nothing there. I think Jeremy wants to get back in the SEC, and what better place to do that than Alabama, okay? Now, Tavares Robinson is very interesting. Obviously, he's been a very successful defensive backs coach under Saban. I think that is probably the hardest position coach to be under Nick Saban because he himself is a former DB's coach, and he obviously coaches a position really difficult, or he's very hard on that position. So Robinson would be very interesting. He's not really been a coordinator, but I would love to see him get a first-time opportunity. And from an LSU perspective, this is the one name I would stay away from at all costs, and that is Todd Grantham. I know he is an analyst currently at Alabama, and I know he has been heralded for his defensive prowess and abilities. But, the last few years of the Florida Gators regime just is not good. It's not good. It was not good at all. So I am just not on board with that. I think that would be a disaster for Alabama. I'd be on board with it from an LSU perspective, but, it's just on simple counter plays on the field right here, giving up, a record amount of yards to Ty Davis Price is still absolutely absurd. I am staying away from Todd Grantham if I am Alabama. I think that would be the only coordinator hire that would be a disaster. So comment down below who you think. I find this to be a very interesting situation, but as we've seen time in and time out, it's never really mattered, right? It's just never really mattered at Alabama who the coordinators have been, right? Yeah, I understand that a lot of Alabama fans did not like Pete Golding. I get it. Totally get it. I know a lot of you didn't like Bill O'Brien. You still had a very freaking good year. It wasn't a good year for, elite Alabama standards, but overall, your units were still fine. I would just stay away from Grantham. So comment down below your thoughts on today's video, okay? It is Power Hour SEC. Bam! And tonight, Are we going to get some lobster mac? Let's go. The Rashada video is floating in your face right now. Go check it out. Let's go.